You probably imagine the origins of the world's largest religion as just a series of calm sermons.
Right, like quiet theological debates in dusty ancient courtyards.
Exactly. Maybe accompanied by a few gentle parables. But what if the true foundation, like the actual spark that ignited Christianity, was a terrifying, mind-bending journey?
Oh, it was.
A journey through heavily guarded celestial palaces where the traveler basically had to dodge murderous angels and survive reality-warping illusions just to stay alive.
Yeah, the historical reality completely shatters that peaceful, stained glass window image we tend to project backward onto the
We
past.
really do prefer our history neat and our theology strictly logical.
Exactly, but the actual historical record of how these ideas formed is just, well, it's far stranger and much more dangerous.
So today we're going on a deep dive into a profoundly paradigm-shifting historical analysis.
It really is paradigm shifting.
Our source material is this meticulous breakdown by Dr. Justin Sledge, the historian behind the channel Esoterica.
He focuses on this highly specific, heavily restricted practice known as ancient apocalyptic Jewish ascent esotericism, which is a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. But our mission today is to look at the historical evidence suggesting that the Apostle Paul wasn't simply a theologian writing letters to early churches.
No, he was a hardcore mystic.
Right. And a highly secret, esoteric trip he took into the celestial realms, essentially, well, it forged world history.
Which brings up the profound paradox of mystical experiences, if you think about it.
How so?
Well, these events happen entirely inside the architecture of someone's own mind. They're locked away in the vault of pure subjective experience.
Right. Completely beyond shared language or verifiable logic.
Exactly. Yet, despite being totally internal, these unseen experiences frequently act as the foundation stones upon which entire empires of religion are built.
It's wild. An invisible experience in one person's mind physically alters the trajectory of human history.
It really does.
So, to understand how a purely internal experience shaped the world you and I live in today, we need to look at a very specific moment of professional panic.
A huge crisis.
Yeah, we're going back to the ancient city of Corinth, right around the mid-50s CE. The Apostle Paul is in the middle of this intense crisis. He's rapidly losing control of his own fledgling community.
Because Paul had spent about 18 months in Corinth founding this community, right?
Yeah.
Preaching his message.
Yep.
And because it was his first truly successful community in a major metropolitan center, the stakes for his reputation were incredibly high.
But then he leaves.
Right. He leaves to continue his work in Ephesus, and severe trouble starts brewing. Other highly educated teachers arrive in Corinth.
The ones Paul mockingly calls super apostles in his writings.
Exactly, the super apostles.
Yeah.
They start systematically impugning Paul's legitimacy to lead.
And, they actually had a rather undeniable argument against him. There's this one glaring hole in Paul's resume, which is he never met Jesus in real life.
Yeah, he wasn't present for the earthly ministry at all.
Right.
He didn't receive a formal face-to-face charge to preach the way someone like Peter did.
And to compound the issue, Paul had actively participated in violently suppressing the early Jesus movement before his sudden conversion.
Oh, yeah. So these new rival teachers in Corinth are essentially asking the community, why are we taking orders from this outsider? He wasn't even there.
So Paul is completely backed into a corner here. To save his authority and his life's work, he resorts to what Dr. Sledge characterizes as a massive, almost reckless rhetorical gamble.
It's a huge gamble.
In his second letter to the Corinthians, specifically chapter 12, Paul writes this bizarre, highly hesitant defense.
Yeah.
He says, I know a person in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven.
And he goes out of his way to clarify that he doesn't know if this person was physically in the body or out of the body.
Right, but claims this person was caught up to paradise and heard unutterable things that no mortal is permitted to repeat.
Notice his intense reluctance there.
Yeah, he refers to himself in the third person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He writes as if he is positively tortured by the sheer necessity of bringing this event up just to defend his credentials.
Okay, let's unpack this because it is a staggering rhetorical move.
It really is.
If we put this in modern terms, it's like someone trying to save their job at a struggling corporate firm by dropping an incredibly massive, totally unverifiable resume flex out of nowhere.
A total Hail Mary.
Yeah, like, look, I know my quarterly numbers are down, but I can't prove it. 14 years ago, I had a secret off-the-books meeting with the CEO of the universe.
Right.
He gave me maximum VIP clearance, but I signed a cosmic NDA, and I'm not supposed to talk about what we discussed.
That is exactly how it functions. It's the ultimate trump card against his rivals.
But there's a catch, right?
Yes. Paul immediately admits there is a severe consequence to this trip. He mentions that because of the exceptional character of these celestial revelations, he was given a thorn in the flesh to keep him from becoming arrogant.
A thorn in the flesh.
Yeah. And he specifically describes this thorn as an angel of Satan sent to torment him.
Which is a detail that has baffled people for centuries.
Oh, absolutely. Commentators have guessed everything from a chronic medical condition to bad eyesight to just an annoying rival teacher.
Because for nearly 1900 years, Protestant and humanist scholars largely ignored or tried to rationalize this esoteric passage.
They desperately wanted to paint Paul as a neat, rational, proto-humanist thinker.
So they stripped away the supernatural grit because it just didn't fit their systematic theology.
But the academic landscape shifted dramatically in the 20th century.
Right, especially accelerating in the 1980s.
Exactly. Critical editions of specific ancient Jewish texts were translated and analyzed, and scholars realized Paul was not speaking in abstract metaphors.
He wasn't just making things up.
No, he was describing his participation in a highly documented, specific, and incredibly dangerous ancient practice.
So what exactly was he practicing?
Well, Paul was likely an adept in what scholars term merkabah mysticism.
Which means chariot, right?
Yes, chariot, and hekalot, which translates to palaces. So this was an esoteric Jewish discipline centered on ascending through the celestial realms to reach the supernal Holy of Holies.
And what's the goal?
The ultimate goal of navigating these divine palaces was to gaze upon the kavod.
The kavod being the physical manifestation of the divine glory.
Exactly. The divine glory resting upon God's chariot throne. Witnessing the kavod was believed to radically transform the mystic into a glorified, quasi-angelic being.
Now, if you're listening to this and wondering why we are talking about chariots and palaces instead of quiet prayer, it's crucial to understand that this was not a peaceful, meditative retreat.
Not at all.
The ancient rabbinic texts, like the Mishnah and the Tosefta, contain dire warnings about the sheer lethality of attempting this journey.
What's fascinating here is the famous, terrifying historical account of 4 rabbis who attempted to enter the Pardes.
Pardes, which is a Persian loanword meaning walled garden, right? And it gives us the word paradise.
Yes, paradise. So the text names these 4 men,
Yep.
Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Elisha ben Abuya, and Rabbi Akiva.
And the varied fates of these 4 brilliant scholars illustrate precisely why the ancient rabbis heavily restricted this knowledge.
Oh, completely. An initiate had to be a certain age, possess immense wisdom, and already grasp deep esoteric concepts just to be permitted to learn the preparatory steps.
Because the story of what happens to them outlines an escalating scale of danger.
Right. So first, Ben Azai enters paradise, simply looks at the divine presence, and immediately dies on the spot.
He just drops dead.
Yeah, because the human nervous system, in the context of this mysticism, simply cannot process the unshielded magnitude of the divine presence.
It's too much data.
Exactly. The cognitive and spiritual overload causes immediate physical death.
Okay, then you have Ben Zoma. He survives licking, but he encounters a seemingly simple obstacle, which is a magical water illusion.
Right.
He looks down, believes he sees water, and his mind completely shatters. He goes permanently insane. And I need to pause here because that sounds entirely random to a modern ear. Why does looking at a puddle in heaven break a genius rabbi's brain?
Well, the texts explain that the floors of the celestial palaces were made of pure, gleaming marble plates.
Okay.
Because the marble was so pristine, it reflected light perfectly, creating the optical illusion of standing water.
Ah, I see.
If an ascender reached that level and asked, "What is the nature of this water?" they instantly revealed their ignorance of the divine architecture.
Oh, wow.
The realization that their physical senses were completely deceiving them in the supernal realm triggered a catastrophic cognitive dissonance. Their tether to reality just snapped, resulting in permanent madness.
That is terrifying. So Ben Azai dies physically. Ben Zoma dies mentally.
Yes.
Then Elisha ben Abuya survives the water illusion and makes it even further, but he suffers a spiritual death. He manages to gaze upon the divine throne area, but what he witnesses turns him into an arch-heretic.
Right, so Elisha witnesses the hyper-angel Metatron.
Okay.
And crucially, he sees Metatron permitted to sit upon a throne to record the merits of Israel.
Why is that a problem?
Because in ancient Jewish angelology, angels do not possess knees. They are biologically incapable of sitting. Their eternal function is to stand in service to the Creator.
Oh, wait. So if an angel is sitting...
It implies that the angel shares the same authority and posture as God.
Oh.
Yeah. Elisha ben Nebuya processes this impossible sight and concludes there must be two powers in heaven,
Which is a huge problem.
arriving at a polytheistic conclusion inside the most sacred monotheistic space imaginable, inspired absolute dread in the rabbinical community.
So out of the four men, only Rabbi Akiva ascends in peace and descends in peace.
He's the only one who makes it.
But surviving the architecture is only half the battle, right? The heavens in this literature were physically guarded by the Malachi Habalah, the angels of destruction.
Yes, these were terrifying, hyper-violent gatekeepers stationed at the doors of the divine palaces.
And their explicit job was to enthusiastically massacre anyone unworthy who tried to cross the threshold.
Enthusiastically is the right word.
The ancient texts describe them threatening to incinerate travelers with fire or, quote, husk them like sheaves of grain.
A traveler could only bypass these angels of destruction by presenting highly specific magical passwords and symbols at each gate.
Okay.
So when we take all of this historical context, the chariots, the palaces, the lethal danger, the necessity of passwords.
And overlay it onto Paul's bizarre letter to the Corinthians.
Exactly. The anomalies in his text suddenly form a coherent picture.
Okay, let's map Paul's letter directly onto this esoteric system. First, Paul claims he was called up to the third heaven. Why specifically the third?
Well, while later merkabah texts detail a system of 7 heavens, the earliest apocalyptic literature mirrored the physical threefold structure of the earthly temple in Jerusalem.
Oh, like the outer courtyard, the inner holy place, and the Holy of Holies.
Precisely. Paul designating the third heaven is his way of claiming he breached the celestial Holy of Holies.
He's claiming he made it all the way to the inner sanctum. But he also mentions hearing unutterable things that no mortal is permitted to repeat.
Right.
If he's in a celestial temple, my first assumption is that he's hearing angelic choirs or divine prayers. What is he actually hearing up there that is forbidden to repeat?
Well, those unutterable things align with what scholars call nomino barbara, which is a crucial element found throughout Hekkalot literature.
What are those?
They were long, entirely incomprehensible strings of Hebrew and Aramaic syllables. They functioned as the secret magical passwords used by ascenders to compel the angels of destruction to let them pass.
Oh, wow.
And because these incantations were the actual language of the angels, sharing them with uninitiated mortals was strictly forbidden.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Mm.
Paul also repeatedly stresses his confusion over his physical state, saying, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know.
His confusion is a hallmark of the phenomenological reports from other merkabah mystics. Yeah, the experience of the descent into the chariot was so viscerally overwhelming that the line between the physical body and the spiritual self was completely obliterated.
Wow.
Initiates genuinely believed they could be physically incinerated by angelic fire during the vision. The danger felt entirely corporal.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Wait, if the danger felt entirely physical to these mystics, and Paul claims he was given a thorn in the flesh from an angel of Satan to torment him, is it possible this isn't a metaphor for bad eyesight?
You're putting it together.
Could Paul's tormentor actually be one of these terrifying celestial bouncers? Did he literally get beaten up by a guardian angel of the divine palaces while trying to bypass a gate?
The textual evidence points strongly in that direction.
That is wild.
Recall the language used to describe the 4 rabbis who entered paradise? The texts frequently mention ascenders being physically struck when they gazed upon the divine. Even the legendary Rabbi Akiva, the only one who succeeded, was nearly struck down by an angel of destruction before the divine kavod directly interceded to spare him.
Oh, so Paul's description of receiving a thorn in the flesh from a hostile angelic force perfectly fits the profile of an adept who successfully reached the throne.
But took a severe, lingering hit from a guardian in the process.
He survived the gauntlet, but it left a permanent mark.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around why anyone would willingly subject themselves to this. You mentioned earlier that the ultimate goal of reaching the kavod was a radical transformation of the self.
Right. The objective was never mere tourism of the heavenly realms.
It wasn't a sightseeing trip.
No, the goal was ontological change.
Mm.
By witnessing the divine glory, the mystic absorbed its radiance and was transformed into an eternal, quasi-angelic being.
Wow.
Historically, this divine upgrade was hoarded by a tiny, fiercely protective elite of hyper-educated, ordained rabbis.
So it's essentially like Paul gained access to a highly guarded, proprietary piece of software.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
A program that only the absolute top engineers were allowed to interface with, and even then, it frequently fried their hard drives if they didn't input the exact string of code.
Exactly. But surviving the trip is only chapter 1 of Paul's story.
Right, because what he did with the knowledge he retrieved from that trip is what fundamentally altered human history.
Right.
He basically took a highly guarded, proprietary, and incredibly dangerous piece of software and decided to open source it for the entire world.
The software analogy captures the mechanics of his theological shift perfectly.
Because what does he actually change?
Well, Paul makes a revolutionary connection. He identifies Jesus of Nazareth as the manifestation of the divine kavod. He unites the figure of Christ with the ultimate goal of Jewish mysticism. And then he introduces an open-source patch.
How does the patch work?
In the old system, reaching the kavod required risking your life, fighting through angels of destruction, memorizing secret Aramaic passwords, and surviving mind-bending illusions.
A total nightmare.
But Paul's revelation bypasses the entire gauntlet. He proclaims that anyone can achieve this quasi-angelic transformation, this regeneration of the self, simply through pistis.
Pistis meaning trust or faith in Christ.
Correct. Proximity to the kavod is no longer achieved through esoteric magic. It is achieved through trust in Christ.
That is massive.
By making this shift, Paul democratizes the divine transformation. Even uneducated commoners, and critically, even non-Jews, can receive the mystical upgrade without ever having to learn a single password or face an angel of destruction.
He took the ultimate esoteric VIP room and just kicked the doors off the hinges.
Exactly.
But establishing a timeline here is critical. If we're trying to pinpoint the exact moment Paul decides to give this upgrade to the Gentile world, we need to rewind the clock 14 years from the moment he wrote that frantic defense to the Corinthians.
Right.
Where does that place him historically?
Tracing back 14 years places Paul in a highly specific, highly consequential moment in Jerusalem.
Okay.
We find a parallel narrative in the book of Acts, specifically chapter 22.
Right. And scholars acknowledge Acts often blends historical facts with dramatic theological narratives. But Dr. Sledge points out that chapter 22 captures a decisive, authentic memory.
Yes, Paul gives his own testimony of being in Jerusalem, praying inside the actual physical temple when he suddenly falls into an ecstatic trance.
He's in the physical temple in Jerusalem, which was the architectural blueprint for the celestial palaces we were just talking about.
Exactly, the earthly counterpart to the heavenly reality.
Right.
In this trance state, Jesus, who Paul has now identified as the divine kavod, appears directly to him and issues a startling command. He tells Paul, "Hurry and get out of Jerusalem quickly. Go, for I will send you far away among the Gentiles."
So what does this all mean? This specific transvision in the temple feels like the exact tipping point of Western history.
It really is.
If this moment doesn't happen, the Jesus movement likely remains a minor, localized Jewish sect debating internal theology in Jerusalem. It might not have even survived antiquity.
That's highly probable.
But because of this ecstatic, trance state vision, Paul pivots outward. The esoteric revelation compels him to expand his mission to the non-Jewish world, transforming a localized sect into a global religion.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text of Acts contains a brilliant historical clue that confirms the crowd surrounding percent. Paul understood the exact esoteric mechanics of what he was claiming.
Wait, they understood what he was doing?
Oh, absolutely. When Paul finishes telling this story to the Jewish crowd gathered at the temple, openly sharing his vision of the kavod and announcing he's giving the secrets away to the Gentiles,
Right.
the crowd erupts in absolute fury. They scream to remove him from the earth, declaring it is not fitting for him to live.
Not fitting for him to live. I mean, that sounds like the standard reaction of an angry ancient mob, just regular mob violence.
It reads like a generic threat until you cross-reference that exact phrasing with the Mishnah.
The earliest written compilation of Jewish oral traditions.
Exactly. The Mishnah contains a strict, highly specific curse regarding anyone who carelessly engages in heretical merkabah speculation.
Oh.
The text explicitly dictates that whoever is not careful about the kavod of the Creator, it would be fitting had he never come into the world.
Oh, wow. The crowd isn't just yelling at a guy they disagree with.
No, not at all.
They are invoking a highly specific theological curse designed for a very particular crime.
The precision of the insult proves the Pharisees at the temple recognized the esoteric taboo Paul was breaking.
That is
He
incredible.
was publicly manipulating the sacred, restricted chariot mysticism. He was claiming he saw the kavod, identifying it as a recently executed apocalyptic preacher, and then announcing his intent to hand these ultimate cosmic secrets over to the uninitiated Gentile world.
So to the crowd, Paul was behaving exactly like Elisha ben Abuya.
Yes, the arch-heretic who gazed at the throne, misunderstood the divine architecture, and dragged heresy into the Holy of Holies.
This context completely reframes how you read the New Testament. I mean, when you normally read Paul's letters, his theology, his theory of salvation, it reads like a dry, meticulously reasoned philosophy. It feels very academic.
But the underlying reality is the exact opposite. Jesus of Nazareth functioned primarily as an apocalyptic preacher in the Galilee region. It was Paul who operated as the hardcore Merkabah mystic.
Wow.
Paul took his own terrifying esoteric visions, his own agonizing magical ascent through the divine palaces, and utilized the mechanics of that Jewish mysticism to forge the structural foundations of Christianity.
He repackaged the lethal ascent into a universal salvation mechanism centered on his revelation of Jesus.
Exactly.
If you are listening to this right now, consider the sheer weight of this historical reality. Whether you grew up sitting in church pews or you simply live in a modern society shaped by 2,000 years of Christian history and ethics, you are navigating a world that was fundamentally catalyzed by one man's esoteric, magical, near-death hallucination in a celestial temple.
It's a lot to take in.
The architecture of Western civilization pivots on a guy who believed he barely survived a beating from an angel of destruction, saw the divine glory, and then open-sourced the code for the rest of humanity.
And this raises an important question, regarding our modern culture.
What's that?
Well, today, millions of people describe themselves as spiritual, but not religious. They feel alienated by institutional dogma, hierarchical structures, dry sermons.
Sure.
They express a deep craving for direct, personal, unmediated experiences of the divine.
They want the experience without the institution.
Right. We often frame this modern urge as a rebellion against traditional Christianity. But looking through the lens of ancient esotericism, we have to ask, what if this modern hunger isn't a rebellion at all?
What if it's not a rejection?
What if it is actually a subconscious desire to return to the religion's truest, most original roots?
Ah, that's fascinating.
These individuals are simply seeking the raw, mind-bending, unutterable ascent that Paul himself experienced long before his terrifying visions were ever domesticated and written down in a theological textbook.
They are looking for a return to the palaces. That is a heavy, paradigm-shifting thought to leave off on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the historical narratives you take for granted, and we will catch you on the next one.